Yeah, I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. I'd like to welcome everybody to Keystone Big Book Study Workshop, or the program of recovery laid out by the first 100 men and women in the first portion of our big book. How we open this meeting is with, let's do the serenity prayer. What do we need for a good meeting? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Those of us that are joining us, welcome. We have studies Monday night, 6 o'clock, same Zoom number for women. Ray has a great study Tuesday nights, same Zoom number, same time, 7 p.m. And there's one over the weekend. You can join on our Facebook group, the Keystone Big Book Discussion Group. We're on Facebook. It's a closed group. You could get a lot of information there. I think there'll be some information in the chat after, and then have access to the YouTube channels that we put on for talks if you want to get caught up, and there's worksheets and all that other stuff. So we put this on, it's because it's designed for your success, but what we need is people who's been successful at this to help you go through, so to have your own experience. So where we're at tonight is we're moving into step 3 in the 4, and this is kind of critical because you hear a lot of people talk about step 3 like this is this big thing that happens, and I wish it was. I wish it was this big thing that happened. That way I wouldn't need to do the rest of the steps. How many people were hoping when you did step 3 you didn't need to do the rest of the steps? That was really what you think, because if you're capable of turning your will in life over in 3, you wouldn't have any more problems, would you? It's like with the guidance of a parent. Like my kids, I used to tell them, if you just listen, you wouldn't have any problems. But there was a problem with their listening. It's self-will. Anybody have kids knows, right? From about 13 to 27, right? Something happens to them, right? So now we have a lot of discussions on parenting, life, and the things that we do, right? So one of the things that step 3 and is a real misunderstanding, because a lot of people go to the 12 and 12 and read step 3 out of there. And if you haven't gone through the process yet, it could be very confusing reading the 12 and 12. To be honest with you, reading step 1 out of the 12 and 12, reading step 2 out of the 12 and 12, reading any step out of the 12 and 12 could be pretty confusing, and it could be an act of applying self to self and just managing better. And we've gone through this in great detail. We're going to jump in around page 63, and I'll do a bit of a highlight here. On 63, it talks about we thought well before taking this step. Why are we taking this step? Yeah, it is to formulate a relationship with a power greater than ourselves, but that happens as the result of the steps. So what is the purpose of step 3? Well, in step 1, hopefully we had the step 1 experience, and we come to the conclusion that we are of the same kind of cut from the same cloth as though that put this together. I could identify, I have these symptoms, I have this problem, but I have yet to have the solution that they're talking about. They're talking in past tense, I'm talking in present tense. Then they laid out the solution to that problem as a psychic change or spiritual experience and the course of action that they took to obtain that. So we see step 2 as a summary of the course of action they took to have this experience. Right? So step 1 and 2 really in the beginning is a diagnosis of what the problem is and what the solution. It doesn't change anything, may give you a feeling of hope, but it really doesn't change anything. Right? Now you know what the problem is. You're either convinced you have this or not. Right? You're either convinced that you need this solution or you don't. Right? And that's one of the things. The more you I don't know if anybody's ever heard this before. If you're having a problem with step 1 is because you don't understand it or don't identify. If you have a problem with step 2 is because you don't understand step 1. Right? And if you're having a problem with step 3, you don't understand anything. So, almost make friends right off the hop. Just go to page 417 and check in with us later. Right? So, it's one of those things where it's critical. I mean, they spent the first portion of the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous from page 63, the doctor's opinion, the forwards, the the spiritual appendix in the back of the book. They've gone into great detail to explain the problem and the solution. Yes? And then they started talking about our biggest obstacle that we're unaware of, but they are aware of, where they talked about here on page 60, being convinced we're at step 3. Right? And they go on to explain the discovery of the things within inside of themselves that caused their problems, but they were unaware of it before they went through this process. They knew they had problems, but they were really delusioned into the fact of where it stemmed from, what was the cause of it, and where it originated from, and the stumbling blocks within their own mind. But as they talked about on page 62, they talked to us. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. How would you know that unless you did their process? They're talking to past. They're looking back and they're saying, hey, this is what we discovered by going through this process. Bill talked about this process when he was in the hospital with Ebby. Ebby talked about this process with Bill as they're sitting at the kitchen table. And all these people talked about this, like even in the where they talked about there is a solution. On page 25, the leveling up, they talked about the process and not so much the understanding of the process, but the experience the process got them. Right? It's one of those things. So where we're at now is I'm making a decision not only to do this process, but to have this experience that all these people are talking about. Because it's really the experience, right? I know a lot of people who understand and could verbalize and could regurgitate the things they heard in meetings and steps or things they read and sound really smart and profound and they're doing this and they're doing, but they've yet to have the experience. They don't talk about the experience the steps got them. Right, where it shifts in focus, right? All the members talked about this relationship with the power greater than themselves that the steps got them. So really, it's not about the steps are the vehicle. We've covered that in great detail. So what am I making a decision to pursue in step 3 is the solution that I've read about and I've seen by the people around me. Does that kind of make sense? Because unless I have this experience, my fate's already sealed as agreed in step 1. Relapse is coming, right? Unless I've had this psychic change or spiritual experience. Not a change in heart or evangelical recovery, I call it. I feel great, things are great, I don't think about it anymore. Well, what did you get like that? Well, I did 90 meetings in 90 days and I'm amazed before I'm halfway through and I got so much me all over me. It's just like, I'm just thrilled. Can I share? No, you can't share. Because what are you going to share about? You're going to share about you. We're tired of hearing about you. Aren't you tired of hearing about you? Is everybody around you tired of hearing about you? So the what happened part is this experience that they had. And Bill talked about in the first 100-minute woman, talked about that this whole basic text is built on, that you can have this same experience. That A is designed for your success. So now I'm going to participate in the saving of my own life by obtaining the same experience that you people talked about. Because it's life and death for me. Remember they talked about that on page 44? Right? We had 2 alternatives. Go on to the bitter end or to obtain this solution or this experience. That's possible. What's our problem? Lack of power. Where do I find this power? Well, that's what this book is about. This process is in hindsight, not in foresight. Because there's no way I could really know what they're talking about. I could see what you're talking about, but I can't experience until I go through it. Are we kind of all agreed on that? Right? So they talk about here on page 63, when they sincerely took such a position, and they talked about their experience. We went through that as we felt new power fluid. And then they say we were now at step 3. So from page 60... the 63 was getting us ready for step 3. From page 44 to page 60 was the transition into step 3. It's really interesting, right? Because that's really what the whole process is about. From page 44 on is how can I obtain this experience and how can I get out of my own way? Because what's our biggest obstacle without realizing is ourselves. I know some people might find that surprising right? So how many people here, when they've heard people read page 61, 62, right, of all these dilemmas, I thought about another person it applied to. Oh, I know somebody like that. Oh, I'm going to leave this at home on the night table so my partner could read it. No wonder I got problems. I'm surrounded by all kinds of people like this. I've never met anybody who said, oh my God, that's me. I can't see it. If I could see it, then I wouldn't need to do the inventory because I'd know the basis of my problem. So they talked about we're now at step 3. And then they talked about the summary of the prayer that we talked about last week. It's a summary. It's an overview of what I could expect, right, if I go through this process. The confirmation of step 3 is the relationship they talk about in step 11. Sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood Him, praying for only for knowledge of His will for us and the power. Because what's our dilemma? Power. All the way through here is getting access to that power. If I could get access to that power without doing this process, then how many people would just not do the process? So we see that our brain how many people thought they've done step 3 here every day? You hear people say, I do step 3 every day. Well, then you don't understand step 3. It's like me saying, I decided to get married to my wife and I asked her 16 years ago. Every day I wake up and I ask her to marry me again. Like, no, the commitment's there. She's like, I don't know if I'm married today. I don't know. Like, wait a minute. There would be problems. You'd have a different speaker here tonight. Honestly, if I ever said that to her. Well, we could arrange that. We got enough dirt in the back to marry anybody. Okay, moving on. So it talked about, we found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person, such as our wife, best friend, because it creates a bit of humility. And somebody hears what we're about to do, that we're going to carry on with the rest of the steps, to abandon our course of action for a new one. Yes? Everybody kind of there? Then it talked about, the wording was, of course, quite optional so long as we express the idea. What's the idea? To have this experience, to go through the course of action as laid out in step 2 to the solution to step 1. That's the idea, that I need to have a psychic change or spiritual experience as laid out in step 2. Step 2 was the outlay of what the solution is, yes? Right? They say you need this solution to this problem. If you have this problem, this is our solution. Through a course of action. The confirmation of step 2, the idea presented in step 2 is step 12. Having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. So there's no real change sufficient enough to bring about recovery, long-term recovery in the first 3 steps. If there was, then we'd just all be doing the first 3 steps all the time. Right? Why is that? Well, they're going to explain it to you. This was only a beginning, though if honestly and humbly made, an effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. I mean, the idea that you don't have to die an alcoholic death is pretty amazing, right? And the people around us and all that the idea that I could have a different story is pretty awesome. If you were stuck out in the middle of the ocean for long enough that you had no food or water anymore, and you know your days were numbered, and your lips were all chapped, and you were sunburnt and all that stuff, right? You knew in order to survive, you'd have to find a vessel or somebody to pull you from that predicament. Yes? That's the solution. When you seen a boat, how many people would get excited about seeing a boat or a plane? You get very excited. But you're not in the boat, right? Or you see it, they don't know you're there, so you need to let them know you're there to get rescued. And that's kind of where we're at now. Like, I'm going to participate in my own rescue here. Does that kind of make sense? So they're saying here is next we lunged out on a vigorous course of action. So that, what does that mean? Now. So what confirms my decision in 3 is I'm starting on 4. If I haven't started on 4, then I haven't done 3, regardless of what I said. It's a form of delusion to believe that I'm starting this course of action that I agreed to in 3 without continuing in 4. Yes? Yep. Would we agree? Next, we lunge down a vigorous course of action, the first step of which is a personal house cleaning. So the first step in bringing this solution about is the fourth step. It's like how many people have allowed their apartment to go to shit in a handbasket? And you look at it every day and say, oh my God, I got to clean this. Oh my God, every day. And and you wake up, it's still the same. You realize, oh my God, I can't believe this place. I'm making a decision to clean this. Well, have you started? No, but I'm making a decision to do it every day. Today's the day I'm going to do it. Well, have you started with anything? No, but I'm going to do it. As soon as you open put the dishes in the kitchen. I remember back when I was drinking, you'd have to stick your hand in there and it'd be like 4 layers of oil and stuff, try to get the sink unplugged, and I'd try to get a stick to do it, and then you stick your hand in there because it couldn't, and you pull it, or get a shopping bag and you unplug it, and like, oh my God, and then you got to take the dishes, and it's horrifying, right? You got to take all those dishes and put them on the counter so you can clean the sink. Yes, anybody been? How many people been there? It's not fun, but it's a start, and that's like where we're at now. It's not fun, but it's a start. And how many people felt really good once it was all done? It's like, yeah, so, and then now I can wait another 3 weeks before I do it again. No, that's not the idea. Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. So, and they talked about here, so we made the decision. Next, we lunged out a vigorous course of action, which is personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. Because why? They struggle with their own ideas and their own thinking. The thinking keeps on wanting to take over. Even though they agreed to do this, their thinking is going to try to talk them out of it. It's like, I got really busy when it came time for me to do my 4-step. How many people got busy here? Oh my God, I can't believe how busy I am. Right? And then my sponsor goes, "What? Like, how's the 4th coming?" Oh, I said, I got to go to IKEA and I got to buy a desk and a light and I got to get the feng shui happening in my place. I bought into that idea. Somebody who's walking with me going, didn't you agree you're on a life and death errand? Like a couple days? Yeah. But I mean, and see, my brain took over without me realizing it took over. And I couldn't see it because it made sense to me. I'm going to get a desk, going to get a light. I'm going to get the right colored pens, right? I'm going to get with some music playing in the background. Then I can start my 4th. I had so much disturbance that I didn't know how disturbed I was. So, though our decision was a vital, crucial step, it could have little permanent effect. It could have little permanent effect unless at once, there's that now kind of stuff, followed by a strenuous effort. Strenuous. You know what strenuous means? Strenuous effort with purpose, strenuous effort to face, and to be rid of the things in ourselves which have been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to causing conditions. We can't apply spiritual principles to alcoholism. We have a treatment for it, we don't treat it. It's a symptom that we have the characteristics of, this illness. So what we need is a way of applying spiritual principles to ourselves so we see the benefit and the magic and the power in it. So if I got to get access to this power, what better way than to apply it where I used to apply alcohol? What did I used to apply alcohol to? Everything. Yes? Anybody? It's the great remover. You got a job, don't worry about it. You won't have it long. You're in a relationship, don't worry about it. It's a great remover. It removes everything. Sometimes your clothes at the wrong and inappropriate moments, but it removes everything. Okay, moving on. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to cause and conditions. I mean, if a symptom means it's still able to kill you, these are the symptoms that draw your attention that I need a solution. It's a symptom. Yes? No? Right? Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding, fact-facing process. So what are we engaged here? A fact-facing, fact-finding process. It is an effort to discover about the truth in trade. It's kind of what they talked about on page 62. But I don't have the same insight that they have. I'm driven by 100 forms of fear and self-delusion. We step on the toes of I have no idea how I'm the cause of all my problems. I have no idea that I initiate 90% of the things that happen to me in my life. I had no idea about that, right? If you're able to see that, I see the effects of it. I see what the bedevilments of it that they talked about, right? Prey to misery and depression, right? And my ability to keep my thinking singular, meaning I don't have the gift of having an overall view of my life. I have a very compartmentalized view of my life. Well, this week's good, so that means I disregard everything. I remember I was at a 2-year cake, and I was all scratched up, and I was in a really abusive relationship. This woman was killing me. She was a normie, so right? And my buddy goes, "Oh my God." He says, "How long you been in this relationship?" I said, "It's one of the best relationships I've ever been in. I get 4 good days and 3 bad ones. I mean, she hasn't tried to kill me yet. The last 2 tried to kill me. That's and he's looking at me horrified. But in my thinking, I'm doing good. I'm doing like the police haven't been at my place. The window, and he's just listening to me rationalize and justify. But in my experience, it was progress, right? Anyways, moving on. Okay, it is an effort to discover the truth about the stock and trade. So it's kind of looking at us. I need to be able to see the truth about the stock and trade. I need to be able to see a process of fact-finding, fact-facing. I don't have that mechanism in my thinking. So they say it's like a commercial inventory or business inventory, kind of same thing. They have a process of going through their inventory to see what's selling, what not selling, right? You ever see people say close for inventory, and then they'd go through a process to see what's on the shelves, what's not working with, and if they're going to be successful, they need to see what product's costing them too much money, what product isn't working. Does that kind of make sense? Right? And then they got to get the sale items out there of stuff, of the stock that's discontinued. You see that in stores all the time. Why is all these things on sale? Because they didn't inventory. These things are costing them money. They need to be rid of them, so they do it at a discount price so they can bring in things that are going to be successful. So if you had the ability to do that with your life, would your life look a lot different? Yes, that's what we're making a decision to do. It's like they talked about on page 54. These things, these feelings and thinking were the fabric of our life. Remember we covered that? We are some result of all our failing thinking and understanding. Decisions are being made at a subconscious level. And when I get the memo, I'm already being driven by them. I'm engaged in this thinking. Anybody have that? Anybody ever notice when you come to, you're in the middle of a thought, you don't know how the thought started? Or an argument, you're in the middle of an argument? Or you're in the middle of a conflict? Well, when did it start? I didn't go, this is a good time to get into a conflict. I think I'll go involve these people. I'm already in it. And I'm being driven by it. Yes, people say, I have an anxiety disorder. No, we have a thinking disorder. How many people's created themselves extreme anxiety here by thinking? How many people's done it more than once? Welcome to that. Now we see why we need to do this. Because my brain's designed to take me into the maze. And once I'm in the maze, I need to create a diversion. And when I create a diversion, people aren't happy with me. Anybody? How many people's had an argument with somebody who's not even home yet? And you're waiting for them to get home and you carry on the argument and they're like, whoa, what's going on here? Anyways. One object is to disclose damaged or unsalvageable goods, to get rid of them promptly without regret. We're not good at getting rid of stuff, are we? We're hanging on. We hang on to things till there's claw marks in them. I like that people say, oh, let go, turn it over, acceptance. Not in our forte. Like that's not in our resume of assets, of letting go of stuff. We let go of stuff after it doesn't move for a while. But we'll go back and kick it to see if there's any left. We're the type of people that get in and argue with somebody and go back and keep checking your phone to see if they've responded yet. Huh? And then when they phone, you don't answer. I got you, right? like when you have that apparatus, how many people here, honestly, would like, those teleprompters that you see people reading off of, that was connected to the back of your mind and had all your thinking running beside you as you're sharing? How many people would have people looking at you really weird? Hey, you want to go for coffee? No, I'm good. I am good. That's that kind of crazy kind of... So anyways, here we go. One object is to disclose damaged or unsalvageable goods to get rid of them promptly without regret. If the owner of the business of our lives is to be successful, we can't fool ourselves about values, values means the energy I place on things. Right? Somebody else looks at them and could diagnose, like, that's crazy. Like behind me, I have all these things, all things that are valuable to me. My wife calls them junk. Junk. She's like, that's my section, and you can't touch it. Because all my other stuff, like people do. My wife, something I really like, it's over in one corner, and then a week later it's in another corner, and then a week later it's in another corner, then it's in the garage. I don't know how it ended up there, but she doesn't. Then I go, hey, where did that go? She goes, what? Anyways, moving on. So value, so you'd look at something over there and think, what's the value? But I have value in it. So when I hold this thing, this trinket or this thing from my past, it reminds me of a situation that I hold value to. I have energy around it. I have memories around it. I have thoughts around it. Anybody? Value. Things we spend time and energy with. Value. Holds value. There's a lot of things in our thinking that are not working for us, but it holds value for us. We hang on to the story. We hang on to the event. Anybody? So, if the owner of the business is going to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. S. We did exactly the same thing with our lives, with our thinking. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our making. See what they're calling it here? Flaws. Things that are not working for us. Incorrect thinking. Later, earlier they called it difficulties and bondage. Now they're calling it something else. Remember on page 63, they talked about here, relieve me of the bondage of self that I may better do that will take away my difficulties. Now they're calling it flaws, right? Or damage or unsalvageable goods and things we hold value to. Right, which kind of breaks back. Is one of my favorite pages, and it took me years to see. Is 54. If you kind of go there for a second, you'll see what I'm talking about, right? So they talked about here's the human condition, right? That's what we agnostics is all about. Is designed to explain the human condition, right? Because none of us are exempt from it. What we used to use for the human condition was alcohol. Would we agree on that? And it stopped working. So I need a new solution for the human condition. What they're offering is spiritual principles that I apply to the human condition that creates a change sufficient enough for me to recover from the illness of alcoholism, where I'm no longer dealing with alcoholism anymore. I'm dealing with the human condition and spiritual progress and daily reprieve. So it talked about here, page 54, it talked about we found, too, that we had been worshipers. What a state of mental goose flesh that used to bring. Oh, had we not vigorously worshipped people, sentiment, things, money, and ourselves, and then with better motives, had we not worshipfully beheld the sunset, the sea, or a flower, who had not loved something or somebody? How much did these feelings, these loves, these worships, these values have to do with pure reason? Little or nothing. We saw at last were not these things the tissue out of which our lives were constructed? Did not these feelings, after all, determine the course of our existence? The actions we take based on our feelings, based on our thinking, we create a story, the story is true to us, and then we start involving other people, they retaliate. right? We create our own problems based on the story that we're stuck to. And then if we can't change the story, then a drink comes back shortly because the insanity returns and we find ourselves drinking again. Why? Because life has become unbearable again and we're still suffering from the illness of alcoholism. So, back to 64, they talked about we did exactly the same thing with our lives, our thinking. We took stock honestly. I don't know how to do that. They're going to show me how to do that. This is the recipe they're going to show me how to incorporate within my life. The same recipe that they had to incorporate that becomes a working part of the mind they talk about later in step 11. Right? The ability to assess, the ability to look at, the ability to see where I'm causing my own failures and applying spiritual principles for a different view, outcome, and overcoming self, the ability to overcome these things that used to cripple me, right? So, first we searched out the flaws that make what caused our friend. Being convinced that self, me, manifested in various ways which had defeated us, we considered as common manifestations. So the common manifestations in here is 4. Is resentments, fears, conducts, and harm. These are the 4 main food groups that we seem to feed on. Harvest and cultivate and carry. Because we can't shake them, so we seem to fall victim to it over and over, and they poison ourselves. So what they say here, so the first one is resentments. Resentment is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything. From it stems all forms of spiritual disease. So where does the spiritual disease come from? Does it come from step 1 in alcoholism, or does it come from resentments? We see it comes from resentments, because long before I realized alcoholism was happening, I wasn't suffering from all the things I was suffering from at the end of my story. Right, I wasn't suffering. People say the spiritual malady. I wasn't suffering from all that stuff. I've had angst and problems before I drank, but I was able to be somewhat successful in different areas of my life until alcoholism took over. Then I started creating a different story. So, absent of the illness of alcoholism, I would have been very successful in a lot of different areas of my life. But alcoholism changed the course of my life because of my inability to do anything about it. So as the progression of alcoholism continued, it continued to change my story, where it became more smaller and smaller and smaller, and alcoholism became more bigger and bigger and bigger. So my world had to change to accommodate my drinking because I couldn't change my drinking to accommodate my world. Anybody? And as time went on, because I didn't have a solution for the human dilemma, I'd start being riddled with these things. And I'd make myself sick. So any human being with the level of resentments that we carry would become ill also, would they not? That's why they talk about later on page 67, though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. Why? Because they took actions based on their thinking, their emotional, or their fear, or their resentments, and they involved us. Yes? Not because they're alcoholic, because the human condition's on them and they have no solution for it, and they're in conflict with it. So, it talks about, from it stems all forms of spiritual disease, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, step 1, we've been spiritually sick. When the spiritual malady, there's the second time they use the word malady, right? The first time was in regards to our thinking around the illness, yes? A malady, an unexplainable event that happens that they call this phenomenon that makes us without defense against the first drink. And here they call about this malady that happens inside of us, right? This angst, this kind of not comfortable in our own shoes. How many people have heard that, right? Like you're surrounded by 1,000 people and you feel alone, you feel disconnected, you feel not part of, right? Because you're instinct based. That's why you're not kind of connected. Later on, they talk about joining the second fellowship. And the first fellowship we join is Alcoholics Anonymous. The second fellowship that we join is the fellowship of the Spirit. That we're all connected on a different level, right? So when we first come here, people are connected to us, but we're not quite connected to them. We feel the hope. We feel like something about these people that kind of lighten us up inside a bit. We feel better when we go to a meeting than we're not, because we're surrounded by our people, and we feel that like the static of their spiritual energy kind of lightens us up a bit. You ever touch something, you get a shock, you got like, it's kind of like that. When you get close to people, you ever feel really good when you see some people in a meeting, you're in there and you talk about this, and it kind of lights you up a bit? Anybody? It's like coming in from the cold, right? You just kind of, like, it kind of does something. You know there's something different, but you haven't fully experienced it yet. So here we go. So they talked about, right, when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally. In dealing with resentment, we set them on paper. Make a list. It's simple. Make a list. Do the third step prayer and start from the top and right down. So on page 65, it talked about where usually is defined as this example. See Mr. Brown, Mr. Jones, my employer, my wife. You see this? Make a list like that on one piece of paper, right? On a separate piece of paper. Then it talks about taking the one name, Mr. Brown, and it talked about seeing, we're doing their inventory. How many people like that idea? Doing people's we're taking their inventory. Why am I resentful? Why do these people bother me? Why am I still carrying the stuff? Well, his attention to my wife. Told my wife of my mistress. You see, it's to the point. It's not a big, long, dragged out story, because it's not about the story. It's about what created the story, right? So I remember my sponsor going, why are you mad at these people? And I'd get into the story. Because they did this. Look, your attention to my wife. And the more I talked about, the more vile I became, and I started doing adjectives. And in fact, where are they? I'd like to go find them. Like, I'd create this mayhem within my life by just talking about this stuff. Anybody have things that they talk about that start getting all worked up? And it's not even happening. How many people got that? Yeah, right on. So the cause is the story. And just the point, you know what I mean? Like whatever comes to mind, and everything on a second column that comes to mind is attention to my wife. Then Mr. Jones, she's a nut. She snubbed me. She committed her husband to alcohol. Her husband for drinking. He's my friend. See, it's just to the point. There's no big story there, right? And then as you go through this, on the next page, 66, and when you're working through the pages, like the worksheets and stuff like that, right? So you start from top to bottom once you have the list. Put the first name, all the causes. Next name, all the causes. Next name, all the causes, right? And it's just like they did on page 65. Can't think of nothing else? Put the next name down, all the causes. You start getting stuck to the story, revert back to your decision in step 3 in the wording of the prayer. The idea of what we're hoping for. So you're starting to get access to prayer. You're starting to create a shift without realizing it, and getting access to something where you're going to start experiencing it without realizing it, right? Why does this prayer work? Why do I get rid of... Well, it's not about why. Do you? Is there a shift? Do you feel something different happening? Is your story starting to shift a bit by applying these prayers? So they talked about here that we see the world and its people, page 66, we see that the world and its people were quite wrong. To conclude, others were wrong as far as most of us ever got. The usual outcome was that people continue to wrong us and we stayed sore, right? Because we keep on putting ourselves in these positions, and people let us down, and we're over dependent on them. We're over, right? Anybody? Right? Why is this always happening to me? How many people got that story? Why is this always happening to me? I can't believe this is happening. Why is God doing this to me? Because our template is designed to keep us going back to where we're trying to get away from. I need a new way of looking at things so I can move in a new direction, right? So it talked about here, but the more we fought and tried to have our own way, the victor only seemed to. Our moments of triumph were short-lived. It is plain that a life which includes deep resentment only leads to futility and unhappiness to the precise extent that we permit these. Oh my God. We're permitting these because we're creating it. We're stuck to the story. We're trying to give you a new story now, but you need to participate in that. That's why sponsorship, the fellowship, and meetings are so important, is that I'm going to participate in overcoming these things that used to victimize me or hold me into a holding pattern of the same story. So it talked about here, which is kind of interesting. This is really important here because this goes back to page 54. It taught permit these. Might have been worthwhile, but with the alcoholics whose hope, this is where we're at, whose hope, our hope, right, is the maintenance and growth of a spiritual experience. That's what we made a decision to do, right? So they're saying before I can experience those things, this needs to happen. This business of resentment is infinitely grave. We found it as fatal. For when harboring such feelings, any feelings that cause this kind of disturbance, here they're just doing the resentment part. So any feelings that cause me disturbance, right, has the same effect. Here they're saying, let's look at just the resentments. But I could utilize this in any other area that causes me deformity or concern or problems. Harboring resentment, we shut ourselves off from the sunlight of the Spirit. What's the purpose of the force is to remove these things and see how they shut me off, right? And if I keep shut off or I don't open the channel, then what does it say? The insanity of alcohol returns and we drink again. Not the obsession, the insanity returns. We're without defense against the first drink. We haven't gone through the work sufficient enough to recover from this thing. So what really, we're in an act of providence or we're in between drinks, right? Because if I don't have this psychic change or spiritual experience, I already agreed that the confirmation of step one is drinking again. And that's the confirmation of everybody in the book prior to what we've read here. They've all confirmed that they didn't go through this course of action. They all drank again. And then when they did the course of action, they had a change sufficient enough for them to recover. So it's a recipe for success, right? So if we were to live, we had to be free of anger. The grouch and the brainstormer were not for us. They may be the dubious luxury of normal men, but for the alcoholic, these things were poison. Spiritual malady, poison. Right, from it stems all forms of spiritual disease. Here they call it poison. It's like an abscess. So the rotten tooth, I don't know if anybody's ever had an abscess. It's not the tooth itself that it's causing the problem, but the symptom of it is what kills you. The abscess is what kills the person, not so much the tooth. Like you can have a tooth decay, but when it becomes acidic or abscessed, creates an abscess in your mouth, that's what kills the person. Interesting, right? Is the symptom of the abscess. So it's the symptom of the resentment, is the harboring of these things that we're poisoning ourselves. I need to be free of this abscess or these things that are stuck to my spirit that are blocking me off from the channel of the human experience, which is spiritual, because we're spiritual beings having a human experience. I need to get from an instinct-based life to a spiritual-based life that's motivated by the people who are around me. That said, that, God made these things possible, and we just smile. But the access of this power is the foremost, the most important part of their life. So when you hear people talk, who's been around a while, sobriety isn't the number one priority in their life. Their relationship with a power greater than themselves is the number one priority. And from it stems sobriety and their relationship with people, places, and things. Right? So we see that we can't keep ourselves sober, but through this course of action here, I could experience longevity. I could experience a different story, the story of Alcoholics Anonymous. We turn back to the list for it held the key to the future. That's what they talked about on page 64, right? Fact-finding process to discover the truth about the stock and trade. We turn back, page 66. We turn back to the list for it held the key to the future. We're prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. So on the worksheets, usually we read from left to right. Now we're going to look like from right to left, right? And what that looks like, it talks about, and we're key to the future. We're prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle. We begin to see that the world and its people really dominated us. Yes, we're prisoners to these things that happen inside of me. In that state, the wrongdoing of others, fancied or real, had the power to actually kill. Power, abscess, block, carrying, creating the same story. The same thing that happened 20 years ago has the same intensity when I think about it now. Why? Because there's energy tied to it that's connected to my spirit. This energy, this abscess, I open a door to it and it unleashes itself over and over and over. It's the same story that I find myself reliving, refeeling, and rehashing. Anybody? How could we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered. So the first part of this process is learning the process to what? To learn how to master resentments. The energy that flows out of me, that it works toward my betterment instead of my demise. How can I turn this where it works for my benefit instead of my demise? How do I sidestep the booby traps that my mind is creating through emotional deformities that I'm attached to? How do I redefine the story that's determining how I feel, think, and respond to the world around me? How do I change it? By mastering resentments, but I need to know where they stem from. And then we see where they stem from. They stem from, earlier, they stem from my instincts. Was it our self-esteem, on page 6, was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, or personal or sex relation would have been interfered with, right? So we see that my instincts are interfered with because I'm living out of an instinct-based life, not a spiritual life, and I'm driven by these things, and when people step on my toes, I retaliate, and I create a story of trying to create security and over-dependence upon people, places, and things. Anybody? So I know there's a lot here, but when you go through it, it's got piecemeal slowly. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you do your fourth? One bite at a time. It may seem overwhelming. That's why it's instructional as you go through it. So they talk about how can we escape? We saw that these resentments must be mastered, but how? Well, they're going to explain that. That's what the question was. We could not wish them away any more than alcohol, any more than our illness, or these things that I carry. Why? Because lack of power is my dilemma. Right? This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were half spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. Can I see why they were acting or being the way they were? Was it their self-esteem, their security, their ambitions? What was going on with them to have them treat me the way they treated me? How did I participate in the way they treated me? How did I set the ball rolling? Or was I actually just at the wrong place at the wrong time and I victimized by this person, place, or thing? And then, so how did I get there? How did it happen? How could I look at them the same way I'm trying to look at myself as somebody who's not well, right? Spiritually well, trying to get well, right? They may not suffer from alcoholism, but I need to overcome these things and harboring these feelings if I'm going to survive me. Otherwise, I'm going to return to drinking again, and I can't afford it. They could afford to stay miserable the rest of their life. I can't, right? They may not drink, they just stay miserable. Me, I drink again. So I'm differently motivated than these other people, right? So this is happening in my mind. Though that's worth reading. Though we do not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience that we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick man, how can I be helpful? God save me from being angry, thy will be done. This is happening in our thinking. Save me from being angry. Save me from being the grouch in the brainstorm. Save me from participating in the same story. Help me be different. Help me move in a new direction. We avoid retaliation or argument. We wouldn't treat a sick person that way. If we do, we destroy our chance of being helpful. We cannot be helpful to all people, but at least God will show us how to take a kind and tolerant view of each and every one of those stories. Referring to our list again, putting out of the minds the wrongs others have done, we resolutely look for our own mistakes. Where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened? How do these things create the story that I'm hanging on to? Right? Why am I still hanging on to them? Am I frightened, selfish, and inconsiderate? What part of this story that I'm saying and hanging on to still has value? What would my life look like if I let go of the story? Am I open to a new story? What would it look like? That's what they're saying here, right? And frightened. Though a situation had not been entirely our fault, we tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame, right? So they talked about what they talked about on page 64, right? One object is to disclose damaged or unsalvageable goods, to get rid of them promptly without regret, to be honest about these things that created these problems. So when I see what creates these problems, how to stop creating them in the future is to not allow them to flourish, develop, or cultivate within me, yes? We tried to disregard the other person involved entirely. Where were we to blame? Right? When we saw our faults, we listed them. We placed them before us in black and white. We admitted our wrongs honestly, and we're willing to set these matters straight. So that's really interesting when they talk about here, place them before us in black and white. So I'm looking at them and we're willing to straighten these things out. A lot of people think that's the inventory part, right? What it is straighten out in my mind on how I look, the truth about it. Well, how did you end up? Well, if I wasn't so selfish and self-seeking, I wouldn't have went to that bar where I knew those people were, but I was more interested in her than I was my own safety, and I went to that bar, right? And I ended up getting a fight. It was probably one of the worst beatings I've ever took in my life because they were involved in a different club than the one I was associated with, right? And so I could say, oh, I can't believe those people did it to me. But meanwhile, I did it to myself because I ignored something by pursuing something that I really wanted. And it could, how many different areas in my life I could say the same thing about? Well, this guy, he owes me money. Well, why? Well, I already knew he was a crooked employer, right? But I needed money, so I went and worked for him. And he didn't pay me like he didn't pay the other guy. So why did you go there knowing that? Because I really needed the money. So you place yourself in a position to be harmed, right? You overrode your instincts or your, I'm resentful at this person. Why are you resentful of it? Because I thought I was exempt from her treating me the same way she treated everybody else. Oh, I see. And why are you mad at this person? Well, because I thought, I needed help with the rent. I needed help with this. So I brought them in, and what they ended up doing was ripping me off. So who invited this whole situation to happen? You knew the truth, but you thought you'd be exempt. So I have this argument in my head. So when these things come up now, it's kind of like, this person, I see how I started that. You know what? It's really not their fault. They treated everybody that way. God saved me from being angry. Help me recreate the story in my mind so when I think about it, there's less energy attached to it. Why did my kids treat me? Why did this? Why did my ex? Why? The whys. Well, let's look at it, right? When you talk to your ex, are you still beating them up verbally and mentally for all the stuff that happened in the past? And you're wondering why they're short and don't want to talk to you anymore because you keep punishing them. Well, what about your kids? Well, why are they reluctant to talk to you? Because you keep bringing up the past. You keep telling them you forgive them, but you mention everything that they've done that you've forgiven. How many people here want to hear about your past all the time? No. So it's funny, but I could bring up other people's past. Well, the same courtesy is... And if I've truly forgiven somebody, or I'm looking at do I bring up that harm anymore, or that problem? No, I don't mention it anymore. Did it say that I want to? Of course I want to. I want to bring it up, but I'm praying not to anymore. I'm trying to correct the story so there's a different emotional, mental outcome attached to the moment. I'm not allowing the past to dictate how I respond, feel, and act today. But I'm willing to look at it. Doesn't mean I'm through it yet. So the next part is the fear. And they get into now this word fear. But this week, kind of look at it and you can look at the sheets and just start a bit like we see like, wow. When I went through some of the problems that I had, I used to think it was mostly other people. Then I realized it was because of my self-esteem. One of my social instinct, my self-esteem and self-worth. Right? So I was in conflict with other people where they say fancy to real. A lot of times I thought I had the gift of being able to think what other people are thinking. I'm probably the only one here. Right? Now I know what they're thinking and I respond to what I think they're thinking, and they're not thinking about that at all. And I've created this problem within me that I'm inviting them into. Right? Or ambition, security. Well, why do you want to become friends with this person? You know they don't treat you. Yeah, but they got money. Remember Bill? My friend in Montreal still had money. What did Bill thought? Bill thought he was entitled to some of that money. How many people got that kind of thinking here? Got in a fight with a taxi driver. His friend said, hey, I can't have this stuff happening around me. Then he got resentful at his friend for what Bill initiated. Right? His friend was going to help him out, but he thought he was entitled to his money. How many people have that kind of thinking around here? I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to ask this person to sponsor me, I'm going to go to this home group because of this, I'm going to do this because of that. There's an alternate motive for the things I do and the things I engaged in. They don't work out right, and I get mad at those people for stuff I've engaged. Kind of interesting, eh? I don't know if anybody found that interesting, but as you go through it, you start learning the first part of the inventory is to learn how to master resentment, see where it stems from. Right? Because if my self-esteem, my security, or my ambitions, or my finances were good, would I have the problem that I had with these people? No, I wouldn't end up there. Would you have ended up going out with this person if your self-esteem was better? No, I wouldn't have ended up going out with them. Well, would you have engaged in this business deal if you were financially a little better off than you were at that time? No, I wouldn't have engaged in that. If your security for the future was more secure based on prudent reserve of the things around you and your relationship with a power greater than yourself, would you have engaged with these people? No, I wouldn't have. Would you went over here and know how they think, feel, and how they respond to life and their views on life, right? Would you have gone over there knowing what would have happened to you if you would have felt better about your life and had better values? No, I wouldn't have. You see that? So now I know these things. Doesn't mean I'm going to stop doing them. It means I'm going to be a little more reluctant. And as I feel more pain, I'll involve God more, right? And that's why we have step 11 later, right? To continue. This is just getting rid of enough of the big stuff that I could start getting enough light shining through there, right? It's like having a whole bunch of stuff all over the windows. Even though it's sunny outside, I could have my room really dark. But there could be a pinhole in the whatever going to the outside, and I have some light coming through there. And if I kind of start working on that and disregarding the opening, moving these things or moving the tape from the window, it starts letting more light in. It doesn't mean all the tape's removed or some of the aftermath, but there's more presence than there was separation. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed today. It's really difficult, but there's a lot of talks on YouTube on Tony.R, 4-step if you want to get more into it. Also, the worksheets are there. If you look at Tony.R, AA speaker Tony.R, the worksheets are on there on how to go through the fourth, right? So it's kind of laid out there really well. Live long and prosperous. There'll be questions after for those that want to participate a little more in dialogue. And we'll close with a great meditative prayer for those who wish. We'll close with the 3rd-step prayer as outlined on page 63. So what's the idea that we're hoping to experience here? What's the purpose, right? And it said here, God, I offer myself to thee. to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those that would help with thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Live long and prosperous. May the force be with you. Thanks for joining us tonight. Bring a friend, bring a sponsor, bring a sponsee. Bring somebody you don't like and resentful at.